One is directed to Professor Gao. Please explain the opening meditation program or meeting. They want to know more about what is the opening meditation.
Okay. Okay, so as a faculty, we meet usually twice a month, and the dean calls the meeting to order, and this is no more than 3 to 5 minutes, where someone offers a prayer. It's not spontaneous. Someone is given the job. You are going to be assigned the opening meditation or prayer. So someone gives a prayer, or they recite a poem, or they play classical music, or they lead a yoga stretch, or they do something like this. And the point I was trying to make is that as I've been on the faculty since 2009, I've seen people become more and more comfortable with doing something other than the Christian model. The Christian model is to do a prayer, right? But people are experimenting and doing other types of things during that opening meditation. Whenever I'm asked to do it, I always decline, meaning to lead it, because I don't do that type of thing. Whenever I'm asked to preach at chapel, I also decline, just because I don't know anything about preaching from a pulpit. I give papers at conferences. I'm happy to talk to audiences like this, but I don't feel myself particularly skilled in leading people in worship or preaching in a chapel. So it's never obligatory that you do it or that you participate. If you have some issues with the opening meditation or prayer, you just sit silently. You know, it's that type of thing.
Yeah. Well, and because we have faculty from different religious traditions too. There will be times when we would invite one of our Muslim colleagues, and when the Muslim colleague leads the prayer, very often they will recite from their Quranic text in Arabic first before they lead the prayer.
That's right.
And because we have learned how to live in this kind of inter-religious world, we can feel that we can be authentic in those kind of situations when someone beyond our religious tradition are leading us in the moment of what we try to conceptualize as a divine human moment.
Okay, second question. What is your advice for open-minded Christian in dealing with criticism that they have received from conservative Christian? Namely, open-minded Christians are often criticized by conservative Christian. What is your advice?
So someone could be open-minded in a number of ways, right? So let's say the question is about your open-mindedness. You're open-minded about which religious tradition really has the truth, something like that, right? Okay. In those cases, I think one thing that I have seen that's been effective is to show people how there is room for ambiguity and the mystery of God within the biblical text, right? So an assumption that some people have is that conservative Christians, they are the ones who are following the Bible. And liberal Christians, they are the people who don't know the Bible, are not following the Bible, don't care about the Bible, whatever. But that's actually not true, right? Or it's not necessarily the case that you can make very strong biblical, you can give very strong biblical reasons. Matthew, 25, the sheep and the goats, right? How is this distinction made between who are the sheep and who are the goats. It's not based, it's 25, right? Am I quoting it right? It's not based on any faith profession. It's based on what? Who is visiting people in prison? Who is feeding the people who are hungry, right? Who is tending the sick? So I think that's one approach. But I think that more so than that, I would say to these open-minded Christians, it's important that you don't dismiss or reject the more conservative ones, because chances are these are your own family members, right? These are your own people in your church. My parents who are sitting 20 feet away, we have very different theological beliefs, right? And this is something that we've talked about for years, right? And I think it's important to celebrate and embrace what you hold in common, but also there are certain times where you may have to agree to disagree.
As I mentioned earlier, I came from a very conservative upbringing, and I can tell you that I am probably one of two siblings who have moved in a theological position. So, out of a family of 8 siblings, I have had to, for all my life, to deal with sisters and brother who do not share my theological, my theological positions and my belief system. And there have been times that it became very, very contentious. And those of you, some of you may have experienced that yourself. I would say to having lived in that kind of world, I can say that one of the things that I would say to open-minded Christians and remind myself over and over again is probably to also continue to draw from our not only our Christian tradition, but the Jewish tradition is so powerful and can be so helpful in helping us live a religious life. The Jewish teaching is not just about learning about doctrine. There is a trajectory within the Jewish tradition that is about halakha. It is about walking, about living out the tradition, and so for progressives, open-minded Christians, it is one thing to take seriously our own Christian beliefs, but also to live it out authentically. And if we, to the extent that we are able to live it out authentically, as Professor Kao said, then it gives people less opportunity to dismiss us. And I agree with what Professor Kao is saying, that we need to model that ourselves. If we keep dismissing people who do not share our same belief system, then we are doing exactly what they are doing to us. And I'm a United Methodist. Every 4 years, we go to General Conference. And it is always a political thing. It is a major fight for the soul of the denomination. And I am trying to remind all of us who are open-minded, progressive Christians, that if we do not learn how to respect people who do not share our positions, then we are doing exactly what they are doing. One of the things that one of my colleagues, when I taught at Pacific School of Religion, has said that has remained very deeply embedded in my thinking is that he once said that fundamentalism on the left is as bad as fundamentalism on the right.
That's true.
So if liberal people end up doing the same thing as the people that they criticize, then they are just reflecting from the other side what the religious right is doing.
By the way, do you have evangelical students in your school?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Why?
Why?
Yeah.
A
All
lot.
sorts of reasons. Yeah, we have. Okay, so I'll say this in a couple of ways. So Dr. Kwan mentioned the United Methodist Church. The UMC is, I don't know demographically, but you could say at least half is evangelical leaning, the other half is liberal progressive. So that's already,
Yeah.
it's in the UMC. We have a large number of students from America Samoa and from Korea. And whether or not they are, Presbyterian or Methodist, they are definitely evangelical. I have a Foursquare student. I've had some Assemblies of God students who
Baptist students?
Yeah, Baptist students, right. They know the liberal ethos of Claremont, but they want to be taught by the top Bible, theology, whatever people, so they come.
Do you have influence on them?
I hope so. I hope all faculty, in the same way that I hope I have influence on the non-evangelicals,
That's
right?
right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any curriculum on dialogue between open-minded Christian and a fundamentalist Christian? Any courses like this?
I can't think of a course specifically on that. I think those types of questions play out as we talk about certain issues, like the status of women, or LGBT, or universal health care, or immigration, or, so those types of, because, again, it's one thing to have theological views, but oftentimes these theological views are culturally embedded, and then they map onto certain social issues, right? So those types of questions usually get asked and answered by the students themselves as they have to negotiate shared space, right? So this is my way of saying not everyone's a Marxist, right? Not everyone's a defender of capitalism or a critic of capitalism. Not everyone's a feminist. Not everyone is gay or anti-gay, or I think that's my best.
Your school. Oh, okay.
I think what we are seeing happening at Claremont School of Theology is that there is always the classroom engagement, but there's also life beyond the classroom.
Yes.
And all the four institutions that I mentioned, in some ways within our own religious tradition, share a lot of commonalities. Our Christian seminary has Christian students from the more conservative to the more liberal. Our Islamic graduate school have students from who are Sunni, who are Shiite, and all different mystical traditions as well. Our Jewish partner have students who are Orthodox, conservative, and Reform, Reconstructionist, and so they are also ecumenical. And our Buddhist university is becoming more ecumenical in their own ways. So we in terms of the kind of identity, we share a very similar kind of identity, and there will always be dialogue within those religious traditions themselves too. And so, but beyond the classroom, we have begun to see that students will find different ways to learn how to relate and respect one another. If there's anything we want them to take away from their education, is learning how to live in this kind of world in the midst of all our differences. We will never be able to agree on everything. But if we can find a way to live in the midst of our differences, then there is an opportunity for them to work together to help rebuild communities. That's what we hope will happen.
Now, your school emphasizes so much on interfaith dialogue. Do you have dialogue with atheists? Particularly, the atheist number are growing in this country.
Yes, right. So there's this. It's called the nuns. Those
yes,
who check
also.
the box. I have no religious preference, or the spiritual but not religious.
Yes.
Right. That demographic is growing among the younger set,
Yeah.
the millennials, and the dialogue is happening naturally because those students are in our classrooms. We have quite a few students, as I mentioned in my portion of the talk, who do not have a religious tradition they espouse, but maybe personally they do Buddhist meditation, they do yoga, they may walk the path of Christian mystics, right? They're a little bit eclectic. And so I don't think the interreligious dialogue class is structured thinking of the nuns as a separate thing, but they are part of our student body, right? That's probably the best way I can think of to respond.
Yeah. We, in that sense, we have not systematically engaged in that kind of dialogue with, for example, the Atheist Association of
Right.
America, or
That's right, or free thinkers or something.
or the Free
yeah.
Thinkers, a more organized group.
Yeah.
So and as Professor Carroll was saying, we had a New Testament professor. We had a New Testament professor who
Yes.
was an openly atheist.
Yes,
Was openly
he
atheist.
has a college degree from Bob Jones University. So at one point of his life, he was a fundamentalist Christian.
Yeah.
And through a very long evolution, became a non-believer. Yes.
Exactly. And one of another New Testament faculty identified himself as a humanist rather than Christian in that sense.
That's right.
So there is it has been a very open-minded kind of faculty, and they have been able to, our faculty have been able to respect one another in terms of our commitment to various traditions in a sense.
Okay, one person gave 3 questions. CST offer MA, PhD, or MDiv for pastoring.
So most people who are pastors or want to be ordained clergy,
Yeah.
they get an MDiv.
MDiv.
Most. But, and then we also offer something called a D-Min, which is an advanced degree after the MDiv. And then, of course, we have PhDs. So a number of our PhD students may have been our former MA or MDiv students, or they could be pulled from the outside. But not everyone is seeking to become a minister. That's still a common student group, people training to be ministers. But there are people who are training to be chaplains, people who are training to work for nonprofit organizations, people who just want advanced study in religion or theology for their own edification or for further work, all different types.
Yeah, and but we have had a very strong tradition in our PhD program of training scholars.
Yeah.
And this goes back to the very beginning of of the history of the school. And as a result of that, we have some of the at one point in time, our PhD program was done with the Claremont Graduate University,
Right.
which was formerly known as the Claremont Graduate School. And so, but it was our faculty that trained these students.
Yeah.
And many of them are teaching in seminaries, in universities, not only here in North America, but also in a lot of places all over the world, in Africa and in many parts of Asia. We have a lot of our alums who are teaching in Korea. One of our biggest international group of students are Koreans. But we also have some alums who are teaching back in Taiwan. The dean just told me that one of our Taiwanese students just finished just defended her dissertation, will be going back to Taiwan Theological Seminary.
Oh, who is this?
The name.
Yeah, I'm
just-
sure. Yeah, in the
What
range.
major?
Yeah.
What major?
Her major is in education.
Oh.
So we have graduates that have gone back to, and in fact we have one Korean student who is now teaching in Taiwan at Changyong Christian University, teaching Old Testament. So we have students who are teaching all over the world, and that has continued to be very important. Professor Grace Carr also mentioned about our interfaith chaplaincy program, which is a Master of Divinity. We graduated our very first class back in May last year. 3 students, a Muslim, a Jew, and a Catholic. And the Muslim student came from a military background from the Air Force, has now gone back to the military to be a chaplain. The Jewish student wants to do hospital chaplaincy, is now up in Seattle doing a year-long residency in CPE, clinical pastoral education. Our Catholic student came from a nursing background and hopes to go back to be a hospital chaplain. That's and in all these contexts, they are trained now to be able to have the kind of interreligious literacy so that they can be a better chaplain in whatever context they are now in.
Do you offer courses like spirituality?
Yes.
What are
I
they?
do not teach those because I couldn't tell you much about spirituality, right? I don't know the titles. Those are mostly taught by Frank and Andy, but yes. But the answer is yes. And I'd be happy to provide a course catalog.
And that is one of our strong areas at Claremont School of Theology now. And they're not just teaching our MDiv students and our MA students. We have more and more students in the PhD program who are interested in that area.
Yeah.
And so they are now teaching future professors and people in spirituality that they will end up leading organizations and others. So in fact, as the president, I had the great honor to brag about my faculty. This has been since Claremont School of Theology started, we have had a long tradition of world-class faculty. And very few seminaries, schools would have three of its former faculty named to the Academy of Arts and Sciences here in the United States. We have John Cobb, we have Jim Robinson, and Hans Dieterbetz, who are all former faculty of Claremont School of Theology, and they are elected to that kind of academy. And with that tradition, we continue to see that our to have a significant faculty who are closer to retirement, but also younger faculty like Professor Cao and others who are now becoming known in their own fields. Professor Cao posted a Facebook post that she found herself being quoted by a scholar whom she had a lot of respect, and then she was saying that how surprised she was. I immediately responded to her and say to her that you may be surprised, but I'm not surprised because I know the caliber of our faculty, and each and single one of them are even the younger ones are becoming more and more known in the field, and I'm very confident that they will be themselves leaders in the field coming along through the ranks of the faculty.
You have John Hick one time as
Yep.
faculty.
Yep.
He's
Very early
I
on.
respect him,
Oh,
his
yeah.
theology very much.
Yeah, very early on.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And in so many different fields, not only in theology and biblical studies, but also in the practical fields, in pastoral care and counseling. We have Howard Kleinbell, who was one of the leading figures.
He was the leader of religious pluralism, right?
Yeah, John Hicks, that's right.
Yeah.
John Hicks.
Do you encourage students to participate or observe different worship method, ritual, silent retreat, etc.? Maybe this is asking about whether, like Christian, will participate Muslim worship. Are you?
Right, so I'm going to give you a very professorial response. So encourage is probably too strong of a word, because that would imply that we have a certain theology, right? We offer all sorts of, there's a Muslim prayer room, and we have something called an interreligious council that puts on events, Sikh event, Baha'i event, whatever. There are all sorts of activities, different worship gatherings happening. These are publicized, and informally students may encourage one another.
Yep.
Faculty may attend or not attend. So clearly there's institutional support for all these various things. But I think to say we encourage it would be too strongly worded.
There is definitely an openness.
Okay.
And what we hope to do is for our students to find ways to be familiar with different religious practices,
Yeah, that's good.
so that it's not foreign to them.
Okay.
If I could just add one more
Okay.
thing. So in the interreligious dialogue and leadership class and in other classes, there may be site visit requirements where you must attend a mosque, you must attend a temple, you must attend an evangelical Christian service or something. Professors are usually very clear about what exactly is the requirement. You don't have to tithe, you don't have to stand up and sing the hymn, you don't have to bow, do the incense. They're very clear about what is the assignment. So in some cases, you may have to go, but are you yourself worshiping? Are you yourself participating? That is usually never required, but you may be required to observe, right?
Now, as I understand, you have professor who teach evangelism, right?
Yes.
Now, what kind of evangelism is he teaching? What kind?
Okay, the title of his job title is, he's the professor of evangelism, mission, what is it, global mission and Methodist.
United Methodist Studies.
Yes. As faculty, we don't really know, if you ask me what are my pastoral care faculty teaching, I couldn't tell you, right? But my guess would be he would be offering different perspectives on evangelism, and he would be coming at it from a United Methodist perspective. That would be my guess, but I don't know.
Well, the whole problem is that the nomenclature evangelical had been,
Yes.
from my perspective, has been misused, and I'm very concerned about when we talk about evangelism. Our immediate reflection is that it is all about conversion.
That's good.
And proselytization, converting other people to Christianity. That is not what the root of the word is all about. Euangelion in Greek is just simply good news. And so if we take seriously our own identity as Christians, we are always, whether or not by words or by deeds, we are living out the good news of Jesus Christ. And the same way that the people of other religions are committed to living out the good news within their own religious tradition. And so my hope is that the way that we teach evangelism within the context of Claremont School of Theology, it is about helping our students who are preparing to be pastors to develop a better understanding of what evangelism is all about, and not to fall into the same pattern of the particularly the 19th, early 20th missionary movement that took on a very different that took a very different form, and brought a lot of colonial mentality in and the demeaning and the destruction of cultures. And we have, for the most part, progressive Christianity has moved beyond that and acknowledged the damage that the misuse of the term has done to cultures all over the world.
Suppose that professor teaches that Jesus is the only way, so you have to preach to them. Do you dismiss this professor?
I think when the hire was made, we had to be very sure that is not the theological position of the faculty.
Okay. So in the interview, you already...
Absolutely.
This was a very cautious, again, all faculty searches every faculty needs to be scrutinized, but this one in particular, because it came at a time where we were really growing in our interreligious commitments, we really needed to be sure that we could all be comfortable with this.
Yeah.
That faculty member is an outstanding scholar. He's ordained clergy in the United Methodist Church, and he's also a personal friend. So, and I can assure you, he is not teaching his students, right?
Well, if he takes that kind of approach, he will be running into problems with our own students.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Now, you may know that Taiwanese Presbyterian Church or Taiwanese Evangelical Taifu, all these are conservative. How can you do with them? Because their way of theology is different from your school. Do you think that Taiwanese church need to have reform?
Well, in knowing the Taiwanese church, and it is not that I cannot speak of the Taiwanese Christianity as a uniform kind of Christianity, because some of the most liberal people that I know among Taiwanese are Christians who were part of the political struggle, the leaders of the political struggles, and these were very progressive thinkers within Taiwanese Christianity. And my good friend C.S. Song is part of that, and a lot of the Taiwanese Presbyterians who were at the forefront of that struggle.
Yeah.
And so, but again, in relation to the more conservative religious traditions, today we have at Claremont School of Theology a partnership with the Coptic Church of Alexandria, Coptic Orthodox Church of Alexandria. In a lot of their theological positions, this is a church that is so rooted in the tradition of the past, and in some of the issues, they will not be where we are as at Claremont School of Theology. But we have found a way for them to be a partner with us. And their students are beginning to enroll in our programs as well. So we have been able to move beyond that.
I'd say a couple of things. One is that I teach classes on Asian American Christianity. It's something I didn't mention in my talk, but a number of Asian American churches, whether they're Japanese or Chinese, or they struggle with the issue of women in leadership. And in my experience, this has not been a Taiwanese struggle. So I attended a church that was a Taiwanese church, EFC, Orange County, that was headed by a woman the entire time I was there. And in my experience, for whatever reason, even if there's conservative theology being taught, the role and status of women has just not been a problem, right? Women elders, women deacons. So that kind of breaks down the liberal versus conservative thing. Also in my experience, Taiwanese people, Christian or not, understand the problem of colonization, right? Given histories with Japan and China. They understand and have a deep desire for freedom given martial law, right? So, and these are traditionally liberal views, right? To be anti-colonization, anti-martial law, wanting for human rights and dignity. So, in my own view, that I don't know if it's about Taiwanese church in particular, but sometimes these liberal versus conservative labels don't work so well.
Yeah.
People tell me that the LGBT issue in Taiwan is kind of not a big deal. That I think there are already progressive laws. I don't know. The details.
I heard the opposite.
You heard the opposite.
Yeah, I heard that the Presbyterian USA.
Oh no, I'm not talking about the church. I'm talking about the society, Taiwanese society.
Society, yeah, maybe different.
Yeah,
but,
right.
But I know the Presbyterian organization in Taiwan, they didn't want to accept that.
So in that sense, they're not unique, though, to a number of American churches, whether mainline or evangelical, who are still struggling in that way.
Now, in Taiwan, many people practice folk religion or worship of ancestor. What is your advice to Taiwanese church toward that kind of folk religion? Because there are Taiwanese church condemn this kind of worship. That if you want to become Christian, you have to totally abandon. What is your advice?
I think it is important to begin to think about, to locate religion within culture. Religion is always very cultural, and especially as people of Asian descent. It is very hard to completely remove ourselves from what is our cultural heritage. And part of our cultural heritage has always been a respect for elders. The whole ancestral, quote-unquote, veneration or worship comes out of the trajectory of respecting the elders. Respecting the elders not only just in life but in death. And how do we continue to live out that respect? It is something that we have to decide. I remember when after I had become a pastor, my grandfather passed away. My paternal grandfather passed away, and I am the second of the grandsons. I'm the second of the grandsons. My cousin is just a few months older, and I had to decide whether or not I want to participate in the funerary rites as a way of respecting and honoring my grandfather. At the funeral procession, there is this carriage of a paper carriage that the grandchildren bore. And I had to decide whether or not I want to honor my grandfather, to be one of the two oldest grandchildren to carry the carriage. I decided that I needed to do that because of how close I am to my grandfather and how much I respect and honor my grandfather.
Yeah.
The rest of my family almost went berserk. The church, a lot of the people from the church just could not understand why, as a Christian pastor, I decided to participate in the funerary rite. I've said this in many occasions. That participation did not make me any less Christian, but it made me more Christian in the sense that I'm living out what learning to love and respect my elder is all about. In the midst of criticism, I was willing to take that on and honor my grandfather.
Yeah, what I hear you saying, Dr. Kwan, is that not every decision you make is going to be just for the sake of theology.
Yeah.
Right. There may be compelling familial or interpersonal reasons why you do what you do. So ultimately, what the Taiwanese church is teaching Taiwanese people may ultimately be a pastoral. I mean, I remember, so some of you may know Ken Fong, who was a longtime senior pastor at Evergreen Baptist Church. It's a very famous church, and he's written about this, because especially in the case of a Christian who feels the pang of conscience, if I do something, it's going to violate my Christian conviction. He has said in so many words, if you act in such a way as to alienate your non-Christian family members, you're going to do more harm to the gospel than you are if you, right? So somehow you have to find some sort of balance between your own personal Christian conviction and what will preserve harmony and peace. So I hear you say that. I want to say that you had said something about folk religions, right? So what I would say to the Taiwanese church is that some of the superstitious beliefs that they may be objecting to are equally to be found in the church in a different way. So maybe Christians are not bye-bye, right? Maybe they're not lighting incense, but they have some sort of prosperity gospel belief that if I pray more, if I tithe more, if I do these things, God's going to give me the thing I want. So it's the same superstitious belief, just in a different religious system, right? So that would be my response. Insofar as you are concerned about people acting out of fear, people acting out of superstition, you might want to clean house in your own church first, not just, pick on these other people.
Now, within Christianity, the conservative and progressive Christian interpret Bible differently. Generally, that's conservative interpret Bible to be infallible, and progressive Christian interpret it as not infallible. In my understanding, that Muslim seems to all believe Quran is infallible. Is this the way that your professor of Islam teach?
Let me take this first.
Yes.
Okay, so we do have a Muslim faculty member, Najiba Saeed, but she is not a professor of Islam. She is teaching interreligious education. We do have other Muslim faculty as part of Bayan Claremont, and they may be teaching different things. I wanted to clarify that. But you were right. So usually what I tell students is that this conservative liberal thing that you just said, that there's a sense in which it's somewhat inappropriate to compare the Bible to the Quran, even though both are sacred texts. Why? Because the Bible and the Quran have different ontological status, meaning, so however high view of scripture you have, even if you think it's infallible in the original manuscripts, whatever that means, let's say you're a fundamentalist Christian, whatever, you still do not believe this is the literal word of God. You believe that the Bible was authored by different people over thousands of years, put together by church councils. So you think it's inspired by the Holy Spirit, written by humans, right? But that is not how most Muslims think of the Quran. They think it's the literal words of God, right? So in that sense, the better comparison is not between the Bible and the Quran, but the Quran as Muslims understand the Quran, and Jesus as the historically Orthodox Christians have said, the Son of God, right? The Word of God, right? So it would help me to know what the concern behind the question is. Is there a concern behind the question, or you're just curious about?
It seems that the Muslim seems not critical in their religious belief.
Okay, so I would say that's slightly an unfair statement, because not only is there the Quran, but there's also all sorts of traditions of interpretation. There are different schools of thought.